Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review Big George Foreman, the miraculous story of the once and future heavyweight champion of the world. Winner for longest title of a movie this year is this one. And this film is from director George Tillman Jr. and starring Chris Davis as the titular, true, miraculous, storied boxer George Foreman. And this particular film is a 2-hour, 9-minute biopic that feels just like a biopic. You sit through the film, it feels like it's reading off a Wikipedia page for the whole entire runtime, beat by beat by beat, as we get through the film. And there's actually, as I was sitting and watching this, I felt like there was an interesting way that this film could have been told. But I didn't write this, so I'm not really going to get much into it. But I just feel like when you get to the second half of this film, which most of the marketing's billing as like, he's Big George Foreman, he's making this comeback. It takes like over an hour to get to that part of his life where he almost died, he found God, and now he's living his new life as a preacher and forced financially back into the ring and trying to find that balance between being this God-loving and not angry man anymore to being a boxer who, when he used to be a boxer, fed off of that hate. And that second half of the film is much more engaging, and I feel like they could have, utilized that more to its advantage of like maybe streamlining this film, focusing on the parts that were more interesting, and doing some flashbacks to some of those moments to fill in the gaps. Because, to be frank, besides the fantastic performance by Sullivan Jones as Muhammad Ali in the first half of this film and that dynamic, there's not much besides just some very generic and not particularly interesting beats of him being a, you show him when he's much younger as this kid who's bullied and stuff like that, but then he gets to an adult and he's doing all the things that a young person being dumb does with money and cheating on his wife, and it does show like he wasn't the best person before he found God. And there's some moments where I feel like this film does the faith-based stuff well, and then there's other ones where it's just so unbelievably blunt and hits you in the face with it that it just feels awkward. And there's such a big shift in tone in this film, and you get to that second half, there's actually some fun to be had. It has a sense of humor, and Tillman, I feel like, feels more comfortable with the direction of the second half of this film than particularly the moments, the first half, where he's more of a kind of tortured soul. And you get into this comeback story, and it's engaging, it's fun, it's interesting. I really appreciate Jasmine Matthews in her portrayal as Mary Joan, his second wife, and their dynamic. They don't dive deep into her character, but her dynamic with Chris Davis, they have fantastic chemistry, and I love seeing them playing off of each other. Davis gives such a great performance because there's so much asked of him. He's playing a completely different person in the first half of this film, and then comes out in the second half of this film and is an unbelievably believable George Foreman in his middle age. Like, I remember seeing George Foreman at that time, and just like, he has that energy. And he has that conflict. And one of the linchpins of the whole film is Forrest Whitaker, who's just this nice anchor to everything. The boxing scenes I don't think are particularly dynamic or interesting, but there are some montages throughout the film. Like, there's a workout montage that he goes on when he has to drop a bunch of weight when he's trying to get back into the ring. That was a lot of fun to whip it. And, like, I just had a giant grin on my face during that part of the film. Generally, I feel like this is a really mixed bag of balancing the faith-based elements, the more conflicted elements of his character, and even just narratively unbalanced from the first half of the film to the second half of the film. And it takes this safe way of just saying this, like, well, we'll go beat by beat this whole entire film, we'll tell the story, and there it is. And it's a miraculous story It just felt like it could have been done in a more interesting way. But I have to say, there is some solid direction going on at certain parts from Tillman, and the cast really comes to play here and makes this a memorable enough experience. And if you could sit through the 2 hours and 9 minutes and the long title, you might have some fun out of this, especially if you have some kind of connection. Like, I knew who George Foreman was, and I enjoy a good boxing movie. I enjoy a good sports movie, and this has enough of those elements to make it an interesting enough time sitting there. Will I ever sit back and watch this again? Probably not. But those are my thoughts on Big George Foreman, the miraculous story of the once and future heavyweight champion of the world. Now I have to remember what I was going to say after that. I had got the whole title right. But let me know what you think. Let's talk some movies. But thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.